these magazines were straight up and down, so the travel time was less. Linotype and Intertype were both redone after World War II. Linograph stopped, and they were out of Davenport, Iowa. And when the World War II was involved, they were shut down and made bomb sites for the Army, Navy, Air Force. And after the war, they never restarted. Linotype and Intertype went back to making machines after World War II. And this is one of the lighter ones that came to Madison in the 50s, possibly as early as late as 1960. We bought it at about 1970 from Webcrafters, who at that time basically quit using them because everything went computer and cold type. Unique part about them is 90 channels, one for every letter. I'll pop it down so you can kind of see the end of the mats that lay in there. All the mats, cap, lowercase, numbers, each have their own channel. These are mats in those channels. There's 92 channels, and they have a little key on the top that gets them back in as they drop. We'll show you how they drop later. I'm looking at about an 18-point X. The size of the type depends on this. There's a dark one and a light one, or maybe it'll be light and italic. But each letter is made like this, and if you want, this is, I'm going to say, is about an 18-point. If you want to have a set of 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, each one has to have another magazine. They're not like a computer where you push the button and make it bigger or smaller. We have a keyboard. It has 90 units. All the lowercase are on one side, all the caps are on the other, all the numbers, quotation marks, parentheses are in the middle. A good typesetter that does a lot of it, this hand, the left, uses a space bar and those two rows. The right hand runs all the rest of the keyboard. I'm not that kind of a person, I don't do that, but virtually all of the typesetting that you do is in those 12 letters. I'm going to hit a capital M. It comes, should tell you how it gets down. These rods go into the back and under this cabinet. This is called a cam, and they're hooked in there, one to every unit. And when you flip the trigger once, it makes one rotation. And if it makes the rotation, there's a rod that goes up and trips this so that each letter drops. So we're going to drop an M again. So it went up, and tripped the letter. They dropped into an elevator here. I'm just going to run some math. Now if I was running regular type between the words, I dropped one of these. This is called a space band. Most of the type, especially in newspapers, was spread left and right in the column. You drop these between the words, and it gets wider as it goes down. When it gets over ready to print, there's a bar that comes up and pushes that so that they each get wide enough to make it left and right solid. Now, when I get ready to make the type, it's going to go up and go over here and drop down into this. This is where the typist is going to print. Now the only part of that letter that we use on this is just that little piece into the mold. The letters are going to lay there. The rest of the mold is in that piecing there. So when we get ready to set the type, this is going to go over and drop in there, and the rest of the mold is set like that. So you're only going to use just the front piece of that letter. I have 4 sizes of type set on this machine. I've got an 8, a 10, a 14, and an 18, depending on which size of mats you're going to use. Now you have to remember, this one is a 10 point, and I'm set for 10 point here. If I want to change to an 18, I have to put up a different mold and a different magazine. Behind me I've got about a dozen magazines of different sizes of type. We're going to put the type up and over. This is going to drop down. The mold is going to come up to this position, and we have a pot of lead in the back. It's 525 degrees. It's got a certain amount of tin in it and a certain amount of antimony that makes the letter stiff. So when you print on it, if it was just lead, it would all just collapse. That makes it sharp enough that you can print on it. Now, we'll just run this, of course. Now it's set to go down into the casting position. Because we have an elevator here, and when we set the types, the person can read the words if he wants to make sure that it's correct as the type says. I said in there, this wish is for you. A major typesetter that does this and has a good machine probably would type that, which is about the length of a width of a column in a newspaper, and an 8-point type, you'll probably print 2 or 3 inches in a minute, because they're pretty fast. And the machine this machine is set up for 30 spaces. I should get back to points. I talk points. A pica is 12 points. That's like the typewriters used to set. Now, in typesetting, that's called a pica, but we use it a little different. If you go down besides the pica, you get 8-point or 6-point. And if you go the other way, you get 24-point, which would be 2 picas. 36 would be 3. The biggest this machine will run is 24-point. But if you're setting some big lines for headings or in a poster or something, you can go up that size. I don't know which or whether this set ever was used that hard. It was in a commercial shop, so that most of the time it was done on posters and billboards and such. So this machine probably never set any speed records, but it has the ability to change. Most of the ones that were moved and used in newspapers only had 1 magazine. This machine has 2, and probably, a lot of the newspaper ones had 6 wheels, so they didn't have to rotate so far. They always were setting a line and set a line and set a line, and 3 lines back would come out as the injection. That way they had a lot more speed. Commercial ones were made like this, so every line went through the whole cycle. I'm sure we didn't get all of the... I'm going to try and stop it at a couple different places. Now if you could read your line, and it'll go over and get ready to go down into the elevator for casting. Now, after it casts, before it puts the mats back to go up, I'll stop it. Casting, it's already solid. Okay, I've got the slug coming out here through the item. Got The mats are already into that upper elevator, getting ready to go back into the unit. Just that fast, it'll take that. It's probably about 400 degrees, but it's cool enough that it sits. As it came out here, there's a set of molds that make that cut that edge, so that when you put all 30 or 40 of them in a row, they don't start making a horseshoe. They get trimmed this way, and they get trimmed off the back before they drop. After you've set the type, this is a chase for the printing. We're talking letterpress now. The slugs that we just made are cut and put into whatever order you need on the press. This happens to be a imprint we're making for JC Auto out of Spring Green. Those are the 3 slugs we made. This happens to have a numbering machine on the side, but you put it in and lock it up to where you're going to print. This is going to be a crash printing job on a invoice, and so it's just as a heading on the invoice. Once it's all put together like a jigsaw puzzle, and you can lift it and hold it up, it goes into the press.